The alarm bell rang through the metal halls of Station Kepler 7. Jake Martinez rolled out of his small bed and hit the cold floor with his bare feet. Around him, other cadets were doing the same thing. But Jake was different from all the others. He was the only human in a place filled with aliens who were much stronger, smarter, and better equipped than he was. Jake pulled on his gray uniform and looked at himself in the mirror. He was 19 years old, with brown hair that never seemed to stay flat and green eyes that always looked like he was about to smile. He was not very tall and not very strong. Most people would look at him and think he was just an ordinary young man. But Jake had something that most people could not see. He had a mind that never stopped working and a heart that never gave up. The mess hall was loud and crowded. Jake grabbed his food tray and looked around for a place to sit. The Zenthari cadets sat together at one table. They were huge creatures that looked like walking tanks. Their skin was thick and hard like armor, and their forearms could crush metal. They ate raw meat and talked in deep, rumbling voices about battles and honor. At another table sat the Vexani. These aliens had purple skin that seemed to glow in the light. They did not need to speak out loud because they could read each other's minds. Sometimes Jake would see them all turn their heads at the same time, like they were hearing the same secret message. Their large black eyes would stare at him, and he always wondered what they were thinking about humans. The Krell cadets did not eat food at all. They plugged cables into ports in their necks and downloaded energy directly into their bodies. Half of their bodies were machine and half were flesh. They could calculate math problems faster than computers, and their metal arms never got tired. They spoke in voices that sounded like robots, always giving exact numbers and percentages for everything. Jake found an empty table and sat down alone. This happened every day. The other species did not hate humans, but they did not see any reason to be friends with them either. Humans were weak and slow and did not have any special powers. In a place where everyone was training to be soldiers and protectors of the galaxy, Jake seemed like he did not belong. "Hey, Jake." Alex Chen sat down, across from him with his own food tray. Alex was the only other human at the academy, and he was 2 years older than Jake. He was very smart with machines and computers, but he was also very nervous about everything. His hands always shook a little when he ate, and he jumped at loud noises. "Morning, Alex," Jake said with a smile. "Ready for another fun day of being reminded how useless we are?" Alex did not smile back. "Did you hear about the survival challenge? They announced it yesterday. We have to survive for 7 days on that frozen moon, Tethys 9. Jake, the temperature there can freeze your blood solid." Jake took a bite of his breakfast. It tasted like cardboard, but he'd gotten used to that. "Sounds exciting." "Exciting?" Alex stared at him. "Jake, cadets have died on these challenges before. Real death, not just failing a test. And we're humans. We don't have thick skin like the Zenthari or internal heaters like the Krell. We have something else," Jake said quietly. "What? What do we have that's better than armor and built-in computers?" Jake looked around the mess hall at all the different aliens. They were all impressive in their own ways. The Zenthari were powerful warriors. The Vexani could share thoughts and work together perfectly. The Krell never made mistakes and could fix any machine. "We're good at surviving," Jake said finally. "Humans have been doing it for thousands of years on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We didn't have claws or telepathy or metal parts. We just figured out how to keep going. No matter what." Alex shook his head. "That's not going to help us when we're freezing to death on an alien moon." Before Jake could answer, a loud voice filled the mess hall. Commander Vexthul had entered the room. He was a Zenthari who was even bigger than the cadet Zenthari. Dodd. Scars covered his armor-like skin, and one of his forearms had been replaced with a metal one. Every cadet in the room stood up immediately. "Attention, all cadets," the commander said in his deep voice. "Today you will receive your team assignments for the survival challenge. Report to briefing room 7 in 30 minutes. Do not be late." The commander's eyes found Jake in the crowd. For a moment they stared at each other. Jake saw something in those alien eyes that might have been curiosity or maybe pity. Then the commander turned and left. 30 minutes later, Jake and Alex sat in the briefing room with 60 other cadets. The room was designed for different types of aliens, so there were seats of different sizes and shapes. Jake and Alex sat in the human-sized chairs, which were much smaller than most of the others. Commander Vex Thule stood at the front of the room next to a large screen. The screen showed pictures of a moon covered in sharp ice formations and strange, colored gases. "This is Tethys 9, he said. "You're home for the next 7 days. The temperature averages negative 180 degrees. The gravity changes without warning due to tidal forces. The atmosphere will freeze your lungs if you breathe it directly." Jake heard Alex gulp next to him. "You will be divided into teams of 5, the commander continued. "Each team will have different species to test your ability to work together. You will be dropped with minimal supplies and must complete tactical objectives while surviving the environment." The screen changed to show a list of team assignments. Jake found his name under Team Delta. Alex was on Team Gamma, which made Jake's stomach sink a little. He would not have his friend with him. The other members of Team Delta were listed below. His name: Zixara, a female Zenthari. Killmoth, a Vexani. Unit 847, a Krell designation. Jake had never worked with any of them before, but he knew their reputations. Zixara was known for being aggressive and proud. Killmoth was one of the strongest telepaths in his class. Unit 847 had the highest test scores of any Krell cadet. "Your team leaders will be announced at the launch pad," Commander Vexthul said. "Prepare your gear and report for departure in 4 hours. Remember, this is not just a test of survival. This is a test of whether you can work together when everything goes wrong. Some of you will not complete this challenge. Make sure you are not among them." As the cadets filed out of the briefing room, Jake felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Zixara towering over him. She was 8 feet tall and her forearms were crossed over her armored chest. "So you are the human on my team," she said. Her voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "I have heard about your species. You are fragile and weak. You have no natural weapons or defenses. You will slow us down and put us all in danger." Jake looked up at her massive form and smiled his usual smile. "Nice to meet you too, Zixara. I'm looking forward to working with you." She made a sound that might have been a laugh, but it sounded more like a growl. "You will not be smiling when you are freezing to death on that moon, little human. Try not to die on the first day. I do not want to carry your corpse." As she walked away, Jake heard other cadets whispering. They were making bets on how long the humans would last. Most bets were for less than 2 days. A few generous ones gave Jake and Alex 3 days before they would need rescue. Jake picked up his gear bag and headed for his room to pack. He was not angry about what Zixara had said or what the other cadets thought. He understood why they felt that way. Looking at him, anyone would think he was the weakest cadet at the academy. But Jake knew something they did not know. He knew that being the weakest sometimes meant you had to be the smartest. And he knew that humans had a long history of surviving things that should have killed them. As he packed his simple gear, Jake whistled a quiet tune. In 4 hours, he would find out if being human was enough to beat impossible odds. He was actually looking forward to it. The drop pod screamed through the thin air of Tethys 9 like a metal comet. Inside, Jake gripped his seat as the pod shook and rattled around him. Across from him, Zixara sat perfectly still. Her thick armor-like skin and 4 powerful arms made her look calm and ready. Next to her, Killmoth had his large black eyes closed, probably talking to other Vexani through his mind powers. Unit 847 was plugged into the pod's computer system, downloading information about their landing zone. Numbers and data flashed across, the screen built into his metal face. "Landing probability successful at 96.7%, the Krell announced in his robot voice. The pod hit the surface of the moon with a crash that made Jake's teeth rattle. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the hissing sound of the pod systems cooling down. Then the door opened with a loud bang. Cold air rushed in like a living thing trying to eat them alive. Jake felt it hit his face and hands like tiny knives. His breath came out in white clouds that froze and fell to the ground like snow. The temperature gauge on his suit showed negative 170 degrees. "Move quickly," Zixara ordered, stepping out of the pod. We must establish shelter before the cold affects our equipment. Jake followed her outside and stopped to look around. Tethys 9 was beautiful in a deadly way. Sharp ice formations reached up toward a star-filled sky like frozen lightning. The ground was covered in crystals that reflected light in rainbow colors. In the distance, geysers of frozen gas shot up from cracks in the surface. But the beauty hid danger everywhere. The gravity was wrong, changing without warning. One moment Jake felt normal. The next he felt like he weighed 3 times as much, then suddenly he felt like he might float away. The cold was so intense that their breath froze before it could leave their mouths. "This is impossible," Killmoth said, his purple skin already turning darker from the cold. "My telepathic abilities are being disrupted by magnetic fields. I cannot sense the others clearly." Unit 847 was moving slower than usual. Ice was forming on his metal parts and his internal systems were working harder to stay warm. "Environmental conditions are beyond acceptable parameters," he announced. "Recommend immediate shelter construction." They had emergency supplies in their packs: a small heater, some food, basic tools and materials to build a simple shelter. But as they tried to set up camp, problems started immediately. Zixara's thick skin, which protected her on her hot homeworld, was working against her here. It conducted the cold deep into her body. She moved slower and slower as her blood grew thick and cold. Her 4 arms, usually so strong, began to shake. Killmoth tried to use his mind powers to coordinate their work, but the moon's strange magnetic fields scrambled his thoughts. He kept reaching for telepathic connections that were not there, leaving him confused and frustrated. Unit 847's advanced computer systems were freezing up. He had to stop every few minutes to run warming cycles, making loud humming noises as his internal heaters fought the cold. Jake watched his teammates struggle and felt something familiar wake up inside him. It was the same feeling he got when faced with any difficult problem. Instead of being scared or giving up, he became curious. How could they make this work? What could they use? What could they change? While the others fought against the environment, Jake started working with it. He noticed that the ice formations around them were not solid all the way through. They had air pockets that could provide insulation. He began breaking off pieces and showing the others how to pack them around their shelter. "What are you doing?" Zixara asked, watching him work. "Ice is actually a good insulator if you use it right," Jake explained, his breath forming white clouds as he spoke. "We're trying to keep the cold out, but we should be using the cold to help us." He showed them how to build double walls with ice between them, creating air pockets that trapped heat. He found that the polymer material from their medical kit could be mixed with ice shavings to make a paste that sealed cracks perfectly. When Killmoth complained that he could not think clearly without his telepathic abilities, Jake set up a simple communication system. He used pieces of polished metal from their emergency kit to reflect light signals between team members. It was basic, but it worked. "Your species has done this before," Unit 847 observed, watching Jake work. "Not exactly this," Jake said, helping. Zixara sealed cracks in her environmental suit with the ice paste. "But humans have lived in cold places for thousands of years. We learned to use what we had instead of wishing for what we didn't have." By the end of the first day, their shelter was not just functional, it was comfortable. Jake had even figured out how to redirect heat from Unit 847's warming cycles to help heat the entire space. Other teams were sending distress signals, but Team Delta was ahead of schedule. On the second day, they had to travel 15 kilometers to reach their first objective point. The terrain was dangerous, with deep cracks in the ice and areas where the gravity changed suddenly. Other teams were struggling, but Jake had been watching and learning. He noticed that the gravity changes followed a pattern. They happened in waves like ripples in water. By timing their movements, they could use the gravity changes to help them instead of fighting against them. "When the gravity gets light, we jump," Jake explained, standing at the edge of a wide crack in the ice. "When it gets heavy, we slide down slopes faster." Zixara looked at him like he was crazy. "You want to jump across that gap?" "Not jump," Jake said with a grin. "Fall with style." He waited for the gravity to shift, then leaped across the crack just as the moon's gravity became lighter. He landed safely on the other side, and signaled for the others to follow. One by one, they made the crossing. Killmoth was the most surprised by Jake's methods. "How do you see these patterns?" he asked as they traveled across a field of sharp ice formations. "I have telepathic abilities and enhanced perception, but I did not notice the gravity waves." "Maybe that's the problem," Jake said, helping Unit 847 navigate around a particularly large ice spike. "Sometimes when you have powerful abilities, you rely on them too much. Humans don't have telepathy or super strength or built-in computers. We have to pay attention to everything around us because we can't depend on special powers." Unit 847 was recalculating his assessment of human capabilities. "Your problem-solving methods are highly irregular, but surprisingly effective," he said. On the third day, they reached their objective point ahead of any other team. It was a supply cache buried under the ice. Jake had rigged a heating system using their emergency flares and metal sheeting to melt through the ice faster than their standard tools could cut it. As they rested in their improved shelter that night, eating warm food heated by Jake's improvised cooking system, the team was different than it had been 3 days before. Zixara no longer treated Jake like a burden. Instead, she asked questions about his techniques and listened to his suggestions. "I was wrong about your species," she admitted, her voice softer than usual. "I thought strength was only about muscles and armor. But you have a different kind of strength." Killmoth nodded, his purple skin glowing faintly in the light of their heater. "You see solutions where others see only problems. This is a valuable gift." Unit 847 was updating his files with new data about human capabilities. Previous calculations did not account for adaptive problem-solving and creative resource utilization. Error in assessment protocols noted and corrected. Jake smiled as he listened to them talk. It felt good to be valued by his teammates, but that was not why he did what he did. He helped because that was what humans did. When things got difficult, they found a way to make it work. On the fourth morning, they woke up to alarms blaring from their emergency communicators. A massive solar flare was heading toward Tethys 9. All extraction points were compromised. The easy part of their survival test was over. Now the real challenge was about to begin. Jake looked out at the ice-covered landscape and felt that familiar excitement building inside him. The harder things got, the more creative he would need to be. And being creative was something humans had always been very good at. "Well," he said to his teammates, "I guess things are about to get interesting." The solar flare hit Tethys 9 like an invisible hammer. Jake woke up to the sound of their equipment crackling and sparking. Emergency lights flashed red inside their shelter, and the radio was making horrible screeching sounds instead of voices. "What is happening?" Zixara demanded, all 4 of her arms reaching for weapons that would not help against this kind of danger. Unit 847 was plugged into their communication system, his metal face flashing with warning lights. "Massive solar radiation. Event detected. All primary and secondary extraction points are compromised. Electromagnetic interference is blocking all communication signals." Killmoth pressed his hands against his purple head. "The psychic noise is overwhelming. I cannot think clearly. The radiation is scrambling all telepathic frequencies." Jake crawled to the shelter's small window and looked outside. The sky was filled with strange colors, green and gold lights dancing like ghosts. It was beautiful, but he knew it meant trouble. On his homeworld, Earth, people called lights like these the aurora. But here on Tethys 9, they meant deadly radiation was pouring down from space. The emergency radio finally cleared enough for them to hear a message. The voice was broken and full of static, but they could make out the important parts. All teams had to reach the tertiary extraction point within 48 hours. The location was on the other side of something called the Shattered Valley. "Shattered Valley," Unit 847 repeated, accessing his database. "Location classified as impassable. Gravity anomalies create unstable terrain. Sharp ice formations move unpredictably. Survival probability for crossing is 0.003%. Jake felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean in normal words?" "It means we are going to die," Zixara said bluntly. Jake pulled up the map on their emergency tablet. The shattered valley was a huge crack in the moon's surface, filled with ice formations that looked like frozen lightning. According to the data, the gravity there changed so quickly and strongly that the ice moved like living things, grinding and crashing together without warning. Other teams are already trying to cross. Unit 847 reported, monitoring the emergency frequencies. Alpha Team has lost 2 members. Bravo Team is requesting immediate evacuation. Charlie Team's signals have stopped completely. The situation was clear. Stay where they were and wait for rescue that might never come, or try to cross, a place that would almost certainly kill them. Jake studied the map more carefully, looking for something the computer might have missed. There has to be a way, he said quietly. Nothing is completely impossible. The calculations are clear, Unit 847 insisted. The gravity changes are random and unpredictable. No pattern exists that would allow safe passage. But Jake was not convinced. In his experience, things that looked random usually had hidden patterns. He just needed to find the right way to look at them. I need to see this place for myself. It took them 6 hours to reach the edge of Shattered Valley. When they arrived, Jake understood why everyone thought it was impossible to cross. The valley was like a vision of hell made of ice. Massive formations, some as tall as buildings, moved and crashed together in a deadly dance. The sound was like thunder that never stopped. The gravity was wrong in ways that hurt to think about. Jake watched pieces of ice fall upward, then suddenly drop like stones. Some formations spun in place, defying everything he knew about physics. Others moved in slow motion, then suddenly shot forward like bullets. "We should go back," Killmoth said, his voice shaking. "This is madness." Jake did not answer. He was too busy watching and thinking. He pulled out his chronometer and started, timing the movements. For 4 hours he sat at the edge of the valley making notes and sketches. His teammates thought he had lost his mind. "Jake," Zixara said gently, "even humans cannot survive this." "Maybe," Jake said, still watching the chaos below. "But I'm starting to see something. Hand me the tablet with the orbital data." He spent 2 more hours comparing his observations with information about Tethys 9's orbit around its planet. The moon had a sister moon, and they danced around each other in a complex pattern. As Jake studied the data, pieces began to fit together in his mind. "The gravity changes aren't random," he announced suddenly. "They follow the orbital pattern between this moon and its sister. Every 47 minutes, the gravitational forces align in a specific way. Unit 847 processed this information quickly. Even if true, the windows of stability would be extremely brief and the paths constantly changing." "Not constantly," Jake said, excitement growing in his voice. "Look at this." He showed them his sketches and calculations. "The gravity waves move in patterns, like ripples in a pond. If we time it right, we can ride those waves instead of fighting them." He pointed to specific areas in the valley. "See how that formation moves? It follows a predictable path every time the gravity shifts. And that gap there? It opens and closes like a door on a timer." Zixara studied his notes with growing amazement. "You want to surf through a field of moving death traps?" Jake grinned, the same smile he always wore when facing something impossible. "When you put it like that, it sounds like fun." Unit 847 ran probability calculations based on Jake's observations. Survival chances increased to 12.4% if timing is precise within 2-second margins. "Still terrible odds," Killmoth pointed out. "Better than 0, Jake replied. "And I think we can improve them." He had an idea, but it was crazy even by his standards. Instead of trying to avoid the moving ice formations, they would use them as stepping stones. The key was understanding that each piece of ice was following predictable patterns based on the gravity waves. "We'll need to work as a team," Jake explained. "Zixara, your strength can help us jump farther during the low-gravity phases. Killmoth, even with the interference, you might be able to sense the gravity changes a few seconds before they happen. Unit 847, your timing systems are more precise than any of ours." "And what about you?" Zixara asked. "I'll be the one who calls the shots," Jake said. I've been watching this valley longer than anyone. I know its rhythm. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jake showed them how to make improvised climbing gear from their equipment. He explained the timing system he had worked out and made them practice the movements they would need. By evening, they were as ready as they could be. Other teams were still trying to find alternate routes or calling for emergency evacuation. But Jake and his team prepared to attempt something that had never been done before. They would cross the shattered valley by dancing with the very forces that made it deadly. "Are you scared?" Killmoth asked as they prepared to sleep before the crossing. Jake looked out at the valley where ice formations continued their eternal dance. The aurora still painted the sky in impossible colors, and the sound of grinding ice never stopped. "Terrified," he admitted. "But that's what makes it interesting." Unit 847 had been monitoring communications from other teams. 2 more teams have turned back. One is requesting emergency evacuation due to injuries. We are now the only team still attempting the crossing. "Good," Jake said. "Less competition." Zixara made the sound that was her species' version of laughter. Over the past few days, she had learned to appreciate the human way of facing impossible situations with humor instead of fear. "Tomorrow we find out if humans really are as stubborn as they claim to be," she said. Jake settled into his sleeping bag, listening to the sound of the deadly valley that waited for them. Tomorrow would be the hardest test of his life. But tonight he felt that familiar excitement building inside him. The harder the challenge, the more creative he would need to be. And being creative in impossible situations was something humans had always done very well. In the morning, they would either make history or become part of the many failures that littered the galaxy. Jake smiled as he drifted off to sleep. Either way, it was going to be one hell of a ride. Jake stood at the edge of Shattered Valley as the first light of dawn painted the ice formations in shades of gold and silver. The deadly dance below had not stopped during the night. Massive pieces of ice still moved and crashed together, following the rhythm that only he seemed to understand. "Gravity wave incoming in 30 seconds, he announced, checking his chronometer. "Remember, when I say jump, we all jump together. When I say grab, you grab whatever is closest. Trust me, and trust each other." Zixara flexed all 4 of her powerful arms. "I still think this is madness, but I have learned to trust human madness." Killmoth closed his large black eyes and tried to feel the approaching gravity changes through the electromagnetic noise. "I can sense something shifting, like the moon itself is breathing." Unit 847 had synchronized his internal chronometer with Jake's observations. "All systems ready. Probability of success has increased to 18.7% based on team coordination factors." "Here we go," Jake said as the gravity wave hit. They leaped together from the valley's edge onto a massive ice formation that was rising slowly in the reduced gravity. Jake had timed it perfectly. The ice block carried them forward like a moving platform, gliding through the air toward the center of the valley. "Next jump in 15 seconds, Jake called out, watching the patterns around them. "Aim for the spinning formation on the left." The gravity shifted again, becoming heavy and pulling them down. But Jake had expected this. They landed on a piece of ice that was rotating slowly, using its spin to throw them toward their next target. For 20 minutes, they danced through the Valley of Death. Jake called out directions while his teammates followed his commands without question. Zixara used her strength to help them make impossible jumps. Killmoth, despite the psychic interference, managed to sense gravity changes a few seconds before they happened. Unit 847's precise timing kept them moving at exactly the right moments. They were halfway across when Jake saw something that made his heart sink. 3 figures were stranded on a large ice formation that was slowly breaking apart. Even from a distance, he could see they were Krell cadets from Charlie Team. Their metal bodies reflected the strange light of the aurora above. "There are survivors down there," Jake announced. "We cannot help them," Unit 847 said immediately. "Additional weight will disrupt our calculated paths. Rescue attempt reduces survival probability to near 0. Jake watched the stranded cadets. For a moment, they had given up hope and were just waiting to die. Standard military protocol said to leave them. Saving his own team was hard enough. Trying to save others would doom everyone. We don't leave people behind, Jake said firmly. Ever. Jake, be reasonable, Killmoth pleaded. We barely have a chance as it is. Then we make our own chances, Jake replied, already working out a new plan in his head. Zixara, how much weight can you carry in low gravity? 2 of those Krell units, maybe 3 if the gravity is very light. Jake studied the moving ice formations around the stranded cadets. A new plan formed in his mind, crazier than anything he had attempted before. We're going to create a human chain across the most dangerous section. Use our combined weight to stabilize the ice platforms. Unit 847 systems flashed with warning lights. Impossible. The stress calculations exceed safe parameters for organic beings. Good thing humans don't know what's safe, Jake said with his usual grin. The rescue became a masterpiece of timing and teamwork that would be talked about for years afterward. Jake positioned his team across 3 different ice formations, timing their movements to create stability in the chaos. Zixara used her forearms to form a living bridge across a gap where gravity pulled in 3 different directions at once. Killmoth, pushing his telepathic abilities beyond their limits, managed to coordinate the timing between all 6 beings, despite the electromagnetic interference. His purple skin glowed brighter than ever before as he strained to maintain mental contact. Unit 847 calculated trajectories and timing with mechanical precision, his systems working at maximum capacity to process the constantly changing variables. And Jake orchestrated it all, calling out commands and adjustments while moving through the deadly ice maze like he had been born to it. When one of the rescued Krell units lost its grip, Jake caught it with one hand while swinging them both across a crevasse using a cable made from their emergency rope. How are you doing this? One of the rescued Krell asked in amazement. Humans are good at impossible things, Jake replied, helping the mechanical being onto a stable platform. When they finally emerged from Shattered Valley, all 7 of them intact, the rescue ships were already waiting. The extraction team's leader, a grizzled Zenthari general named Korkthul, stared at them in complete disbelief. How? Was all he could manage to say. Jake looked back at the valley where ice formations continued their deadly dance. His uniform was torn, his face was frostbitten, and exhaustion made him sway on his feet. But his smile was as bright as ever. Humans don't know when to quit, he said simply. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. As their transport lifted off from Tethys 9, Jake sat with his teammates and the 3 Krell cadets they had rescued. The mood was different now. Unit 847 had begun adding new variables to his calculations, factors he called human unpredictability coefficients. Killmoth spoke quietly about courage that went beyond telepathic bonds and logical thinking. Zixara looked at Jake with something that might have been awe. Your species survived on a death world for millions of years without claws or armor or natural weapons. Now I understand how. How? Jake asked. You treat impossible situations like puzzles to solve instead of walls to stop you. You never accept that something cannot be done. The rescued Krell cadets had been quiet during the flight, processing what had happened. Finally, one of them spoke. We had calculated our probability of survival at 0%. We had accepted termination as inevitable, but you changed the equation. That's what humans do, Jake said, watching Tethys 9 shrink below them. We changed the equation. Word of the Tethys 9 incident spread quickly through the Galactic Defense Academy. The impossible rescue became legend, studied by tactical instructors and told as inspiration to new cadets. The Academy changed its training, protocols to include courses on adaptive problem-solving and unconventional resource utilization. But Jake was not interested in the fame or the policy changes. The real victory was simpler and more important. For the first time in galactic history, beings from different worlds had learned that the greatest strength was not what you were born with, but what you refused to accept as impossible. Commander Vexthul called Jake to his office a week after their return. The old Zenthari warrior looked at the young human with new respect. The other species in the galaxy have always wondered what humans could contribute, the commander said. Physical strength, no. Telepathic abilities, no. Advanced technology, no. But now I think I understand. What do we contribute? Jake asked. Hope, Commander Vex Thul replied. You contribute hope. The belief that any problem can be solved, any challenge can be overcome, any person can be saved. In a galaxy full of species that know their limitations, humans refuse to accept that limitations exist. Jake thought about this as he walked back to his dormitory. The halls were filled with cadets from dozens of different worlds, all training to protect the galaxy from threats both known and unknown. Many of them nodded respectfully as he passed. Some even smiled. In the mess hall, he found Alex Chen sitting at their usual table. His friend looked up with amazement as cadets from other species invited Jake to sit with them. So, Alex said quietly, still think we don't belong here? Jake looked around at the diverse gathering of beings who had once dismissed humans as weak and useless. Zixara was teaching a group of cadets about human problem-solving techniques. Unit 847 was sharing data about human variable factors with other Krell cadets. Kilmoth was trying to explain to his telepathic classmates how courage could exist without psychic connections. I think we belong here more than ever, Jake said, sitting down with his food tray. Someone has to show the galaxy that impossible is just another word for interesting. Outside the station windows, stars burned in the infinite darkness of space. Somewhere among those stars were challenges that had never been faced, problems that had never been solved, people who had never been saved. Jake smiled as he ate his dinner. Humans had been defying odds and laughing about it for their entire history. In a galaxy full of new, impossible things, they were just getting started. After all, changing the equation was what humans did best.